The last kind of big piece of this is kind of the overall scheme. This time period that we're talking about is called the era of good feelings. Now, the market revolution is going to run really from the American Revolution up until the 1900s. You could argue that the first and the second industrial revolution are part of this market revolution. But the era of good feelings is this kind of right post-war of 1812 up to mid 1820s 10-ish year period where you're starting to see nationalism rise. The Federalist Party is going away. People are getting unified. James Monroe is going to become president, another Democratic Republican. He's going to bring sort of his political opponents on board. Not only is he doing it to kind of unify the country, but it's also a smart move, right? No longer is he competing against people that threaten him. He's welcomed them into his cabinet. He's welcomed them into his administration. And people are seeing it as a sign of connection. People are no longer fearing that their government is working against each other, but rather the government is working toward them. So as nationalism rises during this time period with Monroe, we have Henry Clay, right? And Henry Clay is known as the Great Compromiser, is going to be his nickname. He's going to be involved within the Missouri Compromise, Kansas-Nebraska Act. He's going to come in play with the American system. So there's a lot of compromises that Henry Clay is involved in. But the American system is this idea that's going to move America towards more of a nationalistic internal country. And Henry Clay's American system has three different ideas. So Clay's first big thing is internal improvements. He wants to see America succeed, and this goes back to the railroads. It goes back to the road, the canals, all things like that. Any place where Americans can kind of work together is a benefit of Clay's. He wants a protective tariff. Right, protective tariff is going to tax, as we said with any tariff, it's going to tax imported goods. It's going to make people more likely to buy goods in America. And then lastly, you want a strong banking system, right? To have these internal improvements, you have to encourage people to rugged individualism, we call it, right? Rugged individualism is kind of this movement towards manifest destiny where people are really starting to expand American society, and they need the money to do that, right? They need the finances. And so the bank is going to come into play with this. Initially, the state bank, and eventually you're going to end up with the second bank of the United States, right? And these banks are going to provide loans for people to go out west, to go out south, and even up north to build their factories, to build more farms. You're really going to start to see the development during this time period because of the banking system under the American system. The first protective tariff is going to be a tariff of 1816, right? This is going to be seen as the Americans are really being undercut by the British. After the post-war of 1812, the British are selling their goods for really cheap. The Americans are trying to compete, and the only way they can do that is to make British goods more expensive. The British could try to undercut them as well, but that would just destroy the American economy. So the British are going to, or you can't impact how much the British sell their goods for. All you can do is tax them and make them more expensive and dissuade people from buying them. Therefore, they can buy American. This is all working really well until the Panic of 1819. Right? And the Panic of 1819 is going to lead to over speculation. As people are going out and they're developing more land, they're borrowing more and more and more money, and some of them are failing. They can't pay back the money. Right? The idea of a bank is to loan money, and if the bank isn't getting back the money, then the bank is going to fail. So post-war of 1812, they're really trying to harden or kind of really going on this internal improvements. And people eventually are just not paying back the money. The banks are starting to fail. And so America has a couple options that they can do. The biggest option that America is going to go with is they're eventually just going to they're going to ask for the money back, right? And if you can't pay your loan back, they're going to foreclose. Just like someone would do the house on your or mortgage on your house, they'll do it on the land, right? So America's starting to foreclose on all these farms, and an issue that's happening here is there was an initial land boom, right? People are going out. America has more land. And post-war of 1812, Britain's starting to struggle a little bit. There's a drought in Britain. They're not making as much product, and America is really pumping out their farm produce. They're selling overseas. Come about 1818, Britain starts to produce more goods, and things are starting to thrive again. And this is where they start to kind of undercut the American product. No longer is Britain dependent upon American goods. They're selling their own goods. So all these people that were going out and getting these loans and thought they were going to make a killing by overseas trading, no longer can do that because people aren't buying American goods anymore because they don't need the American goods. It's this idea of supply and demand, and when demand goes down, the money's not there for them to pay back their loans. So this conservative policy by the Second Bank of the United States to stop giving out loans, to really tell the state banks to put a cap on it, this is going to hurt America initially, right? This is going to cause a recession. There's multiple recessions in the 1800s, and the cause of this really is something that we call a boom-bust economy, right? The idea that as you know, you're going to go up as an economy and you're going to go down, right? That there's rises and falls because of what's essentially happening within your society and what's happening overseas, right? You can't predict what's going to happen in a world economy. So sometimes it's going to be good, sometimes it's going to be bad. And the debate really kind of comes into play, and you see with the Great Depression, is how much should the government get involved? And during this time period, the government decided we're not going to get involved, right? We're not going to give handouts. We're not going to give loans. We're going to work our way through it. And then eventually in 1824, so about 5 years after, we see kind of an uptick, and America gets out of this recession. So, you know, in this case in time, it takes a little bit. There is some struggles with American society, but eventually you hit that boom period again, that boom cycle, and America is able to get out of it. So this is kind of the positive aspects of the American system, the era of good feelings. We start to see a transitioning country in terms of factories, the relationship between the North and the South. And all this is going to eventually set up to is, as America expands, you're going to have more conflict over slavery. Where should slavery be? You're going to have more conflict over whether or not the Second Bank of the United States is favoring the northern factories over the southern farmers. Debate over just who owns pieces of land. Debate over tariffs. The South feels like the tariffs are hurting them because there is kind of pushback tariffs by foreign countries. When America puts a tariff into place, countries respond with a tariff, which means it's going to hurt the southern farmers. The northern factory owners like it because it makes their product more competitive in America. So there's a debate over a whole bunch of things. You know, the 1820s is really the beginning of the jump off to the Civil War, which is going to happen 40-ish years later. And a lot of the issues that we see within Democrats and Republicans today can be traced back to the tensions that existed sort of in this 1820 post-era of good feelings time period, that really kind of come about as America tries to kind of increase nationalism and internal improvements and the betterment of sort of, or the more focus on American society and kind of a policy of isolationism during this time period. Ultimately, what we'll see with Henry Clay in the American system is there's a policy, just like President Trump said, of America first, right? And under this America first policy, the issue is going to be that you're going to kind of break some foreign relationships, right? And the question is whether or not you can build back those foreign relations to sort of, once you're strong enough as a country, can you then build on that by rebuilding those foreign relations? That's it. We're done. There's some questions to answer along the way. Hopefully you answered them. Hopefully this helped you. Some of you probably like this. Some of you probably hated it. But at the end of the day, have a good day and smile.